This is First Coast Math Clinic with Lesson 6, Finding the Least Common Multiple, or LCM, from our Foundational Skills videos. So the goal in this video is to calculate the least common multiple, or LCM, given a set of values. So what is our least common multiple? Well, the least common multiple is the smallest number that two or more numbers can divide into evenly. So we're going to go through a couple different ways to find the least common multiple, starting by just creating a table of values. So let's say we've got 3 and 4. We want to find the least common multiple. The easiest way to do this is by just creating a table of values. So I've got 3 and 4. Here's my table of values. I'll list my values that I'm going to multiply by off on the side. And I'll multiply 3 by 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I'll get 3, 6, 9, 12, and 15. 4, I'll multiply by 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I'll get 4, 8, 12, 16, and 20. You want the smallest number they have in common. So that's going to be 12 and 12. All right, so our LCM, our least common multiple, is going to be 12. All right, let's get into a couple different examples where we're calculating the least common multiple using a table of values, as well as by finding the greatest common factor first if the values are a little tricky. So we'll show you two different ways to calculate the least common multiple. All right, so let's find the LCM for 12 and 15. So I'm going to set up the same table, 12 and 15. I'm going to show you two different ways to find the least common multiple for these values. So we've got 12 and 15. Let's create our table. Then we've got our values that we're going to multiply by on the left. We'll go up to 6. So let's multiply 12 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we'll get 12, 24, 36, 48, 60, and 72. Then let's multiply 15 times 1 through 6. 45, 60, 75, and not 80, should be 90. So now, based on our table, our least common multiple is going to be our 60 and 60. All right, so what's another way we could find the least common multiple? Let's say that, going up to 60 isn't too far, but what if our least common multiple was a lot higher and we had to continue this table a lot farther? What's another way we could figure out the least common multiple? Well, we could figure out the least common multiple by finding the greatest common factor first, right? And if you want a review on finding the greatest common factor, you could check out the link for the video that's going to appear right now. So remember, our greatest common factor, we can create our factor tree, and I'm just going to, in the interest of time, I'm just going to factor these into our greatest common factor. So our greatest common factors for 12 and 15 are going to be 3 and 3. So our greatest common factor is going to be the largest factor that is going to be, that we can divide into both 12 and 15. So we've got 3 and 3. So 3 times 4 and 3 times 5 are going to be our factors for 12 and 15. Now what we can do is put together our numbers that are not the greatest common factor. So let's multiply the 4 and the 5. So that gives us 20. And then bring down our greatest common factor, the 3. So now we can multiply the product of those remaining factors, 4 and 5, times our greatest common factor, and we get our least common multiple 60. So that's another way that we could do that. Okay. So we found our least common multiple by creating our table and by finding our greatest common factor. So two different ways. Let's go through a couple different examples of finding the least common multiple using our table and by finding our greatest common factor first. For number 3, we've got 27 and 36. We want to find our least common multiple. So let's start by just creating our table. So we've got 27, 36. Let's list the values we're going to multiply by on the left. Let's get up to 5. And then our multiples for 27. We'll have 27, 54, 81, 108, and 135. Our multiples for 36. We'll have 36, 72, 108, 144, and 180. So what is the smallest multiple they have in common? Well, we've got 108 and 108. So our LCM is 108. So what if we want to find our LCM by finding our greatest common factor first? Well, what if this? So we only had to go up to like our fourth multiple here for 27 and our third multiple here for 36. Well, what if this table continued and we didn't want to have to keep extending this table? Well, let's find our greatest common factor first and see if we can use the greatest common factor to find our least common multiple of 108. So remember, to find our greatest common factor, let's set up our factor tree. So 27, let's start with our prime value. We could do 3 and 9. And then 9, we could do 3 and 3. And then 36, I'll do 3 and 12. Then 12, we could do 3 and 4. And then 4, we could do 2 and 2. So for 27, our factors are 3 times 3 times 3. 36, our factors are 3 times 3 times 2 times 2. So, well, what factors do we have in common? We've got 3 times 3 and 3 times 3. So our GCF, greatest common factor, is going to be that 3 times 3, or 9. Okay, so let's figure out how we can, what our least common multiple is using our greatest common factor. So 27 is 9 times 3. 36 is 9 times 4. So let's pull out our greatest common factor of 9 and then multiply our remaining factors, the 3 and the 4. So 3 times 4 is 12. And then multiply that greatest common factor, 9 times 12, and we get 108, our least common multiple. So two different ways to find our least common multiple. All right, so we could either just extend our table, or we could find our greatest common factor first, create our factor tree, greatest common factor, 9 and 9, and then multiply, take our greatest common factor, times the product of the remaining factors, 3 and 4. All right, let's do one more example. So number 4, we've got 24 and 44. So let's set up our table. So we've got 24. And 44. I think we're going to have to extend this pretty far. So I'm going to list the values we're going to multiply by on the left. So our multiples are 24. We're going to have 24, 48, 72, 96, 120, 144, 168, 192, 216, 240, and 264. And then for 44, we're going to have 44, 88, 132, 176, 220, and 264. So we had to extend this table a little bit further. We had to get to our 11th value for 24 and to our 6th value for 44. But our least common multiple, our LCM, is going to be 264. Okay, so something like this, it may be easier to find our greatest common factor first, because again, we're extending this table a little bit further up to our 11th value. So let's find this using our greatest common factor. So let's start creating our factor tree. So 24, we've got 2 and 12. And then 12, we've got 2 and 6. 6, we've got 2 and 3. And then 44, we've got 2 and 22. 22, we've got 2 and 11. So for 24, we've got 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. 44, we've got 2 times 2 times 11. So our greatest common factor, what do we have in common, right? We've got a 2 and a 2 and a 2 and a 2. So that's going to be our greatest common factor, 2 times 2 or 4. All right. So let's factor this out. 24 is 4 times 6. 44 is 4 times 11. So let's pull out that 4. So we've got 4, our GCF. And then we've got the remaining values, the 6 and 11. We multiply those together. We get 66. And then 4 times 66 is going to give us 264, which is our LCM. So again, two different ways we could do this. We could either create our table of values and just keep extending it until we find our matching values, the two values our table have in common, or we could find our greatest common factor and take that greatest common factor and multiply it by the product of that remaining factor of the that leftover value, the value that you need to multiply the greatest common factor by to get the original numbers. Okay, so two different methods here. Again, if you like this video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. This was lesson 6 from our foundational skills videos, finding the least common multiple for First Coast Math Clinic.